Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. The state lowered the minimum age to receive the COVID-19 vaccine to 60 years old this week, but some rural communities are facing an uphill battle to administer the vaccine.
Without our volunteer staff in Greene County, we would be vaccinating 100 people a week, and we're vaccinating 500. So, that's more than doubled.
As part of Black History Month, we look at how racially restrictive covenants and property deeds limited access for African Americans to get a home in Bloomington during the 20th century.
I told him I'd really like to buy a house, but there's no realtor who would sell me a house.
And the latest on what bills are and aren't moving through the legislature at the Indiana Statehouse, including a measure that would limit the governor's emergency powers. Those stories and the latest news headlines from around the state right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. About 1 million Hoosiers have received their first dose of the COVID vaccine, and about 500,000 are fully vaccinated. Monroe County health officials say they're administering about 800 doses of the vaccine each week. One of the clinics is at the Monroe County Convention Center. This week, I got to take a tour to see how the process is going. Bloomington resident Richard Wilson showed up for his second shot Wednesday. He says it was a little difficult to register at first because all the time slots were booked.
I feel very relieved, and my wife is younger than I am, and hers isn't until March the 31st, and I wish she already had it.
Hoosiers age 60 and older can sign up for an appointment to get the vaccine. When you show up, the process is simple. After a quick temperature check, ushers show you to a registration table. 5 temporary cubicles are set up to administer the shot and make a return appointment.
I think you need a stick. Or you want it right there? Yes. Let's put it right there.
The process takes about 30 minutes, including a 15-minute wait time to make sure no one experiences adverse reactions.
But the most common side effects are really just a sore arm. Could get low-grade fever, a little bit of achiness, but that's just your body making those antibodies.
County sites are using the Moderna vaccine, and hospital sites are using Pfizer. The Moderna vaccine can be stored for 30 days in a refrigerator, while the Pfizer vaccine must be kept in ultra-cold storage. The state receives about 250,000 doses of the vaccine each week, but that number could start going up as soon as next week. Health officials expect to begin receiving vials of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Wilson says when it's your turn to get vaccinated, sign up.
Don't wait, do it.
The convention center site has been taking appointments since early January on Mondays, Wednesdays, and half-day on Saturdays, with hopes to expand as more vaccine becomes available. Now, Monroe County health officials say once the weather improves and age restrictions decrease, they hope to set up drive-through clinics and outreach pods. Indiana University officials are also willing to offer up facilities such as a public site once more vaccines become available. As rural health departments continue to distribute vaccines, many are running into issues beyond just hesitancy. Brock Turner has more on the uphill battle some health departments are facing.
For Sherry Lewis, this past year has been beyond trying. For months, she and other local health officials have faced uphill battles with limited budgets to approve local events, contact trace, and help schools stay open. While vaccines offer hope, it's also another task that already taxed local health officials are managing. Data from the Kaiser Family Foundation reveals rural residents are more likely to view vaccinations as a personal choice and are less likely to be worried about contracting COVID-19. To make matters worse, public health resources and staffs tend to be limited in these areas.
We started off slow for the first 2 weeks. January 11th, we were vaccinating every other day with one vaccinator.
But Lewis and her team would quickly ramp up their local efforts, thanks in large part to a group of 20 volunteers.
Without our volunteer staff in Greene County, we would be vaccinating 100 people a week, and we're vaccinating 500. So, that's more than doubled.
Among those volunteers is retired nurse Peggy Wolf. Wolf has volunteered after other disasters, but never this close to home. She says a call from the state health commissioner, Dr. Christina Box, provided the incentive she needed to help her local health department.
I decided to step forward after Dr. Box was sending out encouragement to be a Hoosier hero. And so I said, well, it's time. And I've done sort of things like this before, but I said, that's enough. And then I just started volunteering doing contact tracing with the health department. And then we went from there to sort of form a volunteer army for this vaccine clinic. So.
While Wolf insists she's not going anywhere, other volunteers might not be so giving of their time. Many rural county health departments lack the staffs and resources to fully fund their own clinics. Before these volunteers stepped up, Greene County could only dedicate one staff member to its vaccine clinic. Similar challenges are felt across the state. That's according to Carrie Thompson, the executive director at Indiana University Center for Rural Engagement. She says the center and other thought leaders are doing their best, but resources targeted for rural communities are rare.
We're all in this alone, almost. And if we could develop some best practices and disseminate them quickly in a trusted manner and allow the people on the ground who are innovating well to share what's working in their communities, then I think that we could have gotten a faster response, and it's something that we should learn from.
Thompson and local health officials agree more funding from the state could unlock new opportunities to reach more residents.
Federal and state aid are going to be made available. It will be put to great use. And at the center, we always, we are firm believers that communities know what they need best.
Late last year, Indiana sent funds to local health departments in hopes of bolstering staffing. Up to $40,320 went to Indiana's smallest counties, but in many, resources are still scarce. Box insisted earlier this week additional funding and members from the Indiana National Guard are available for vaccine administration. Lewis is searching for funding from anywhere to compensate her volunteers.
They're coming, they're spending 20 hours or more in the clinic at, completely free, like totally volunteering. So I would like to be in a position to at least, compensate them for gas, for lunch, or, some type of stipend.
While some health departments have been able to staff clinics, several local health officials admitted they could be vaccinating more people if more funding was readily available. In the meantime, Wolf is going to continue volunteering at the pop-up vaccine clinic in Greene County. She's also taken up lobbying her neighbor.
I have a neighbor who is on the county council, and I've solicited him to say you need to get them more money so we can help out with either gas or just even perks. We have a wonderful team here that said it's almost like it's a homemakers club because everybody brings in food for us. And it's the volunteers that bring it in.
Lewis insists the volunteers have made a fundamental difference and given this community a shot in the arm. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Brock Turner.
COVID-19 vaccinations are ramping up across Indiana, but the state continues to limit who can get the vaccine. Pat Bean reports.
While Indiana lowered the minimum age to 60-year-olds this week, it also began cracking down on sites it says are vaccinating ineligible Hoosiers.
There have been a rare instance, I would say, where individuals have really gone way outside the guidelines, and that is a situation where we ask that we basically said they would no longer receive first doses from us.
A recent letter from the state to distribution sites said people who are not already eligible or without a qualifying medical condition should not sign up for any wait list. That has eliminated the only avenue for teachers under 60 to receive the vaccine. Educator Shannon Brown called 3 different pharmacies to register for the standby list about a week ago. But last weekend, she received a call saying she had been removed from one of the lists.
A second pharmacy called me and said that they were not prioritizing teachers according to the state's orders, and therefore I was not on the list.
She is not the only one. Several teachers and school leaders have used the wait list to get the shots. They are frustrated by the push to reopen schools without vaccinating teachers.
I just don't feel like the state cares. I just don't feel like Governor Holcomb is being real with us.
Tanner has already received her first dose, so she will be able to get her second as well. Box said sites that violate the eligibility requirements will receive no more first doses until they come into compliance.
When clinics don't follow those guidelines, whether it's for overall eligibility or for their wait lists, they create inequities around the state or even within individual communities.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Pat Bean.
Indiana surpassed 12,000 confirmed COVID-19 deaths this week, with more than 70% of those coming after the state moved to stage 5 of its reopening plan in late September. State health officials say there are an additional 425 suspected COVID-19 deaths. Now, the state averaged more than 96 deaths in December, 66 in January. So far in February, the state is averaging about 24 deaths per day.
From where we were a month ago to where we are today has been, and I don't use that word loosely, remarkable.
While almost half the state has moved into the lowest blue advisory range, Holcomb extended the state's COVID emergency plan for another month. He cites an influx of fans into the state for the upcoming Big Ten and NCAA basketball tournaments as a reason to remain cautious. A group of Bloomington City Council members is proposing a new law to protect people experiencing homelessness and camping in city parks. But as Ethan Burks reports, not all city officials are on board.
Bloomington's long-standing quarrel with the issue of homelessness came to a boil again this winter when an encampment began in Seminary Park. The city then decided to enforce park rules that prohibit overnight sleeping. The camp was removed twice in early December and then again in mid-January. But now the city council will consider an ordinance that would give certain protections to these types of encampments.
It is not an ideal step. It is not ideal for anybody to be camping outside in this weather. However, people are doing it, and people will do it regardless, because there will always be people who cannot go to a homeless shelter.
Piedmont Smith, along with fellow council members Matt Flaherty and Kate Rosenbarger, are co-sponsoring Ordinance 21-06. The law would require the city to give a 15-day notice before removing any future encampment, as well as to store people's personal belongings for up to 60 days for retrieval.
Our current policies criminalize homelessness and violate our residents' rights and dignity. This ordinance is a way to stop doing that.
The proposal would also let the city choose where an encampment is allowed, but under two conditions: that it must be within 1 mile of an organization that serves meals 5 times per week, and that it must have access to a public restroom. Bloomington has 3 places which provide these services: Wheeler Mission, Beacon, and the community kitchen. An encampment would have to be somewhere within these zones.
It gives the city a path to proper, humane ways of getting everything they want while honoring the obvious needs of our unhoused neighbors. It will clearly establish a zone that will not affect business or residential areas.
But not everyone supports the proposed law. City council members are split on the decision, and Mayor John Hamilton and his administration are against it.
I'm not sure it's in the city's core service area to locate a place for people who are experiencing homelessness for a place to stay.
Reniason says the city does not have the staff to maintain a 24/7 encampment, nor is it qualified to do so. He says it's the city's job to keep working with local organizations to solve the problem. The Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce issued a statement saying it does not support the law either, due to several complaints from businesses near Seminary Park. And Bloomington Parks and Recreation is worried the ordinance would result in added costs and staffing for its department.
To build a brand new restroom in an area that does not currently have a restroom is upwards to $175,000.
Another key point of debate was the language of the ordinance itself, which says a camp may not be removed if sufficient housing isn't available. The council as a whole is asking for more clarification and says it cannot make a final decision until those details are straightened out.
I frankly think it's flawed on many levels, not the least of which is the fiscal impact that has not been successfully studied and presented to us, and that's one of our biggest responsibilities up here.
The issue will be discussed by council again next week. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ethan Burks.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. The state legislature marked the halfway point of its session this week. Ahead, we take a look at some of the bills in the works. And as part of Black History Month, we take a look at covenants and deeds that prevented African Americans from buying or renting homes in Bloomington. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
Stay close to Indiana Newsdesk as we trace education issues all the way from the Capitol to your child's classroom. So many topics that arise each year in the Statehouse affect what happens every day in the schoolhouse. The WTIU News Team is committed to helping you stay up to date with the issues that affect your family's future. Keep yourself informed. Tune in to Indiana Newsdesk, your source for regional and state in-depth news.
One small step for man. Yeah, there's a place for us. Yeah, there's a place for us. Where only we can go. We as a people will get to the promised land. Spit down the doors, knock out the lights. We're gonna be just fine. Yeah, there's a place for us. Yeah, there's a place for us. As long as we're together, we can go anywhere.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. The U.S. Department of Education says standardized testing is a go this spring after being canceled last year because of COVID-19. The government is offering states some flexibility in how those tests are administered and how the data is used in the federal and state accountability systems. But Monroe County Community School Corporation Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Mark A. Winston, questions the value of the tests.
We don't think that assessing our children in the midst of this pandemic is going to give us accurate and reliable information about the skills that our children possess.
Well, the Indiana State Legislative session is officially at its halfway point. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith joins us to talk about some of the bills making their way through both houses. Hello, Brandon. The House approved a 2-year, $36 billion budget this week. What are a couple Republicans' selling points?
Well, Republicans tout $378 million new dollars for K-12 tuition support, though more than a third of that money would go to private school vouchers. They also point to grants they've created for small business recovery, student learning loss, law enforcement, training and facilities, and regional economic development. Now, Democrats, like Indianapolis Representative Ed Delaney, say that the budget is failing to address many of the state's critical needs.
Are we going to continue to be overweight with high blood pressure, with low college graduation rates? Is that what we're going to do? Can we continue to pay our teachers $10,000 less than they should be making? This budget is absolutely devoid of any vision.
Democrats also have an issue with the fact that Republicans rejected every single one of their amendments to the budget, including small amounts of money for food banks, women and minority-owned businesses, and pre-K education.
Brandon, over in the Senate, Republicans passed legislation that would allow the state attorney general to take up cases local prosecutors declined to. What are some issues that led to that action?
Well, if you listen to the bill's author, Republican Senator Mike Young, he points to prosecutors in other parts of the country who've announced that they won't be charging certain categories of crimes, which is what this bill would cover. But of course, everyone else thinks and believes that Mike Young is doing this because he disagrees with Indianapolis prosecutor Ryan Mears' decision not to charge people if they possess small amounts of marijuana, an ounce or less.
Both chambers are controlled by large Republican majorities. What are some things the Democrats would have liked to have seen addressed?
Yeah, not just large, but super majorities. So Democrats literally don't have much of a say in anything. Of course, they'd like to get to a lot of issues that Republicans refuse to get to: more robust police reform, an expansion of voting rights, things like that. But one thing that the Senate Democratic Caucus, led by Minority Leader Greg Taylor, really point to is help for working Hoosiers.
Don't those workers who in the times of pandemic had to go to work to make sure that we have and keep the freedoms that we have today, don't they deserve an increased minimum wage?
All right, Brandon, thank you very much. Out of time, but we look forward to what happens in the second half of the session.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, with Black History Month coming to a close, our look back at African American history in southern Indiana stays in Bloomington, where reporter Mitch Legan stands by with our latest installment of City Limits.
I'm here on Jackson Street in Bloomington's near west side. Now, the area around me was home to some of Bloomington's earliest black communities back in the 1800s. We received a city limits question on the city's history of racially restrictive housing covenants, and I was tasked with finding out.
I think the main thing that strikes me is that there's so much we don't know, and it's very easy for us not to know.
In their most basic sense, covenants are private agreements in a housing deed that the buyer of a property must follow. They can cover anything from how tall the fence is to what color the house is painted, and in the past, who could live there.
At first I couldn't believe it, and then I totally could believe it.
As the Monroe County Recorder, Eric Schmitz comes across the covenants regularly in his work. So much that his office began a project last year to collect and identify documents containing the racial language.
Sometime in the 20s is the earliest one that I remember that I was able to find.
One local historian has traced the earliest racial covenant back to 1917, when University Courts Realty Company inserted the language into a deed. The real estate, it said, shall never be rented to a colored person or sold to a colored person. Today, that area sits off 7th Street, across from Dunn Meadow.
And basically, they thrived, and they helped to define and to determine, especially the way American suburbia looked.
As Bloomington developed, the covenants became widespread. The recorder's office has identified at least 10 plats containing the language. Any residences located on the plats would carry those covenants, so the city's number is likely much higher.
I'd have to look at our spreadsheet again. Heaven only knows how many there are in the miscellaneous records.
The racial covenants continued through 1948, when the Supreme Court ruled them unconstitutional.
It simply said those are unenforceable as contracts. We're not saying you got to get rid of them. We're not saying you got to wipe them out. We're not saying you could sue somebody for trying to put it in there. We're just saying the courts will wash their hands of it.
But just because the covenants were made illegal didn't mean buying a house got any easier. Though unenforceable, the language remained in the deeds, and social pressure kept homeownership a primarily white venture.
Social pressure is as significant as legal precedent.
Just ask Ken Thomas, who moved to Bloomington in 1965. Despite having a good job and being a Korean War veteran, Thomas was unable to find a home to buy.
It was awful, and there was one realtor that sticks in my mind. He absolutely told me that he did not have anything a person of color could buy.
He spent his first months in town renting while getting the runaround from local realtors. Until one day, a Jehovah's Witness noticed Thomas's out-of-town license plates, and the two got to talking.
I told him I'd really like to buy a house, but there's no realtor would sell me a house. And he said, well, I'm a builder. He said, if you buy a lot, I'll build you a house.
Others got ahead of the issue before it could become a problem. Gene Devane was friends with a white lawyer who ensured everything went smoothly.
Having grown up in the South and understanding the unwritten rules, I decided to circumvent that. I heard complaints from those friends of ours who tried to get homes and were not successful with it.
The Fair Housing Act of 1968 put mechanisms in place to ensure equal opportunities in housing. But Bloomington didn't differ much from the rest of the country when it came to racial covenants. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Mitch Legan.
Indiana is among 10 states that experienced the largest increase in gas prices over the past week. Adam Pinsker tells us why a winter storm isn't the only reason for the spike.
The national average for a gallon of gas went up 13 cents during the past week. Hoosiers are paying 16 cents more per gallon than they did last week. However, the national and statewide average for a gallon of unleaded gas is $2.63.
They're not going down anytime soon, at least not drastically going down anytime soon.
A winter storm that took out 40% of the nation's refineries is partly to blame. The storm dumped record amounts of snow in Texas and Oklahoma. Even though people are driving less during the COVID-19 pandemic, production of crude oil is increasing.
What's driving crude oil prices is really the promise of a vaccination. We saw those crude oil prices starting to increase at the end of November, post-election.
Although travel is likely to increase this summer as more people get vaccinated, it will not reach the levels seen during pre-COVID-19 summer travel seasons.
The market's optimistic that yes, people are going to travel this summer. And are people going to travel? Yes. But we don't anticipate it being anywhere near where we've seen it in typical summer.
In March 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, the average price for a gallon of gas in Indiana was $1.84 and $1.99 nationally. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Adam Pinsker.
And Indiana University plans a return to all in-person learning this fall at all of its campuses. IU President Michael McRobbie says the decision was made with the advice of the school's medical and public health experts and that COVID-19 cases on campus remain manageable. He added a return to normalcy in the fall relies on students, faculty, and staff getting vaccinated as soon as they become eligible. Well, that's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.